What's up, guys? Welcome back to the rating climb. Today we're going to be looking at games that I played against people in the 1000 to 1200 range. We're going to be going through the thought process just like before. Real quick, before we get into those games, I wanted to mention one of my patrons. He has a visual impairment and he likes to play slower games because of that with increments. I told him that I would just mention it on the channel if anybody likes to play longer time control games, so over an hour with increment. And you'd be interested in playing against him, I'm going to put his link to his chess.com profile down below. It can be difficult to get people to play you at those longer time controls because most people just play faster games. And so I just wanted to throw it out there. I told him that I would mention it. If you guys are looking for someone to play longer games with, he's rated right around 1100. And so, like I said, his link will be down in the description if you want to check that out. All right, having said that, let's go ahead and jump into the games. All right, so here's the first game. I was black, and I decided to go with the Latvian gambit this time instead of the elephant gambit. So my opponent took it. This is actually the main line, and I played knight to c6. Now, normally speaking, when you move your f-pawn like this, and there's a knight on e5, you have to watch out for queen h5 because this 9 times out of 10 is very, very dangerous and actually very good for white. And this is no exception. It is good for white, but I was intentionally playing this line with the idea that I would play g6. The knight's going to capture because the pawn is pinned. And before I recapture, I throw in this move knight f6 to attack the queen. So even if the knight did try to move somewhere and put me in check, I'm able to take the queen and get out of the check that way. So it's fine for me. So the queen has to move. Usually it goes back to one of these two squares. Then I take the knight. And after this, we get this kind of crazy position. Yes, I'm technically losing according to Stockfish, but there's a lot of development, a lot of pressure on white's king. It's very tricky for white to figure out what to do. And so I like to play this, but I do want to make sure that I mention, be very careful allowing a move like queen h5 unless you know what you're doing, because most of the time it's going to end badly for you. And so just keep that in mind. This is an opening that I've studied and played a lot. I'm not just randomly pushing this f-pawn. I actually know what I'm doing. So just keep that in mind. But my opponent didn't play that and just captured the knight. So this is kind of the other main line where we simply capture with the d-pawn and we get both of our bishops out ready to start attacking. We have lots of open files we can use for our rooks. And here we go. So e5, this is a good move. This is also one of the common lines, trying to kind of keep things closed off and so that my bishops can't be as effective. So bishop e6, this is basically the plan behind this opening. You play bishop e6, you play queen d7, you castle queenside, and you use this open file to put pressure on, usually white plays d4 and you put pressure on that d4 pawn like with c5. So I'm kind of just following the ideas about this opening that I'm already aware of. So I'm not really having to do too much thinking as far as why did I play this as opposed to any other move. Well, I knew that this was the plan, right? So that's why I did that. Okay, d4, queen d7, exactly what I explained. I'm just following through with the plan. Queen h5 check. This is not really a great move because it's easy for me to just kick it away. And this is something, whenever you throw in these checks, whether it's queen h5 or sometimes bishop b5 is a check, you always want to ask yourself, what's going to happen if they block with a pawn, right? Like in this case, g6, sometimes on bishop b5, you can play c6. You want to ask yourself, am I going to be losing a tempo and have to just move? And if the answer is yes, then maybe that's not the best move for you, right? And so that's what happened here. White just kind of wasted a move. Now they have to move their queen somewhere because I could block with the pawn, right? And so it didn't really help white very much. So queen goes here. And I took on d4. I actually missed a tactic here that Stockfish found right away, and I'm surprised that I didn't see it. It's kind of a weird one. It's not one that I'm used to looking at. So I'll give you guys a chance. What do you think the best move for black was in this position that I did not play? Well, if you said bishop h6, you are correct. And the point is very simple. It's a skewer where the queen has to move and then you capture the piece. And there's no way for white to save both of them. You can either save your queen by moving it away, then you lose the bishop, or you can obviously save the bishop if you wanted to give up your queen for 2 pieces. But regardless, it's a good trade for me. Surprised I didn't see that one. It's, looking at it now after the game, it's pretty obvious. But I was sort of just focused on this d-pawn. And so, not that this was a bad move, but, it's always better to get a piece instead of just a pawn. But anyway, I took on d4. And then my opponent played queen g3. and I decided to just go ahead and castle. This was the plan that I was going to do anyway, and it just made sense to follow through with that and threaten checkmate immediately on d1. And it kind of goes back to, I've talked about this before, if you can accomplish multiple things at the same time, it's usually a pretty good move, right, in chess. And so I want to castle anyway. I want to get my king out of the center. I also would like to put my rook here on this open file. And at the same time, I'm threatening checkmate. So it makes a lot of sense, right? So that's what I did. And my opponent played bishop g5, which is a huge blunder. You should be able to figure out why. That's correct. I just said, right, it's checkmate, and white didn't stop that. So I just played queen d1, and the game was over. So pretty quick. This was a good example of how understanding the idea of the opening that you're playing can help you have an easy game, right? So I knew everything about this opening. I knew I was going to play knight c6. I knew that I was going to take this way. And I knew that if they push, my plan was going to be this castle long, put pressure on the d file. That's what I did. I didn't really have to change much about the plan. And so I missed that one little tactic there, right? I missed bishop h6. But other than that, pretty easy game. And I got, unfortunately for white, they didn't see the checkmate, so we didn't get to play on. But anyway, let's go ahead and look at the next game. All right, so here's the next game. I was white, e4, c6, knight c3, d5, and d4. So I tried to transpose into kind of like it's like a Blackmar-Daymar gambit almost, where if black would have taken, I was going to play f3, allow this, and give up the pawn. But then the idea is bishop's going to go to c4. I'm going to castle, and I'm going to use this half-open f-file to really put pressure on black's f-file. So that's kind of the idea. Unfortunately, didn't get a chance to do that in this game. My opponent just declined. And, we talked about how I'm trying to play aggressive gambits. If your opponent plays something like this, there's not a lot you can do. Like, you can't really force an aggressive gambit against an opening like this. You kind of just have to play good moves, and it doesn't really make sense to go crazy with it. I think you just need to play solid moves in a case like this, right? So c5, and this is kind of a wasted move. Like, this idea is not bad for black to play e65 and c5, but usually they'll play the French and then immediately play c5, as opposed to this way, black actually wasted a move, right? Took two moves to put the pawn there when you could have just played e65, c5 if you wanted to play this. So a little bit of a, I would say, inaccuracy by black, and it just kind of gives me a bigger lead in development. Now, I didn't actually know what to do here. I was contemplating which way should I capture? Should I just leave it? Everything's nicely defended. And so I decided on kind of a simple move. And this is a good, I think, general rule. If you're not sure what to play in a position like this, you can't really go wrong with bishop e3. Why is that? This is just a normal developing move that puts my bishop on a good square. Like, if you're not sure what to do, play a normal developing move, put a piece on a good square, and you can't really go wrong. Now, of course, Stockfish says, no, that was the wrong move. I was supposed to play bishop e5 check and do some other stuff. But, it's not a bad move. And this is a good, just kind of general rule. If you're unsure what to do, just develop a piece to a good square, and things are probably going to work out fine for you. Okay, so the knight comes out. And now I decided to capture here. Why did I decide to trade now? I wanted to give black an isolated pawn. So the point was, if black captures here, I wanted to take here. And notice how this d5 pawn is now isolated. That basically gives me a target for the rest of the game that I can focus on. So queen d2, bringing my rook over at some point, piling up on it. g3, bishop g2, even like something like this, maybe the bishop can come around. There's lots of different ways I can approach it, but this is a weakness that now I can attack. Okay, and so that's what I wanted to go for. Now, my opponent captured with the knight, so I didn't get the isolated pawn, but I also saw that here I could trade the knight, and again, I'm threatening the same thing. If black takes this way, I'm going to take here, and I have that isolated pawn as a target. Now, again, my opponent didn't do that. They took with the queen. But then that's fine. I saw that I could take here. And if queens come off, this pawn is actually going to be difficult for black to recapture. Okay, so one of the things about the c pawn, if you take it, a lot of times the queen can come to a5 with check, and it's very easy for black to recapture that pawn. They just would take it with the bishop. But after the queens come off, well, that's not really the case. My bishop's defending it nicely, and I'm not sure how black is going to take that back right away. And so it's kind of like I'm just up a pawn, basically. So I was happy with that. And my opponent did trade queens. And, you know, this is good for me. Now my rook is already involved in the game. And like I already talked about, this is kind of annoying for black. Knight a6 is one general idea, but I have bishop takes a6 for that. The other plan would be knight to d7 to attack it, but then I have bishop to d7 pinning it. And again, I don't see how black's going to take that pawn. So nice position for me now. Knight to c6, bishop to b5. I'm just developing. I'm getting ready to castle and get the other rook involved in the game. And yeah, not much else that I really thought about there. Bishop d7, and I castled. Now, I will point out here, I did debate playing a move like king to e2, because when you get towards the end of the game, the active king is actually really good. You want your king to be involved. The reason I didn't is because I decided that there could potentially be some tactics along this diagonal if I'm not careful. There's a knight check. There's, you know, the discovered check with the bishop, or discovered attack with the bishop. I wasn't sure if it was quite late enough to do that. And since there's still a lot of pieces on the board, even though queens are off, we're not quite in the endgame yet. And so I decided, let me just go ahead and castle. I think I will have time later to bring my king over. And this way, you know, I don't have to worry about the bishop here, and my rook can easily get involved. So I decided to just go ahead and castle. b4, I just wanted to solidify this pawn and begin pushing my pawns where I have the advantage, right? So I have 4 against 2, and over here I have 3 against 4. So I'm not going to be able to do anything with these pawns over here as far as creating a passed pawn. If I'm going to create any passed pawns, it's going to be on the queen side. I already have my pieces in a pretty nice position. Already have, for the most part, my rooks are pretty good. Maybe I could have considered doubling up on this file, but I decided to go ahead and just start expanding over here. And of course, black can't take this because of the threat on the bishop there. So b4, a6, and I decided to go ahead and trade. The reason I gave up the bishop for the knight, because I wanted to clear the way for my knight to invade, which it couldn't do right now. And so this is debatable whether or not that was a good decision. Maybe, you know, keeping the bishop on the board makes more sense, because black's bishop really is kind of awkward. And by trading, by trading, I kind of put black's bishop on a really nice square. So it's a trade-off. I don't know if Stockfish says I made the wrong choice, but at the time I wasn't sure, and so I went with this one just because I wanted to get my knight in, immediately pressure that, and once I can trade that off, then this rook becomes more powerful, especially if black is going to be castling kingside. I want to be able to come in with my rook. So that was kind of the idea. That is what happened, but black could have made my life more difficult if they played something like bishop b5. Yes, I can chase it away, but then there's bishop a4, and you know, this bishop's kind of annoying. So I don't know what would have happened if that happened. But let's move on. And I did get to do what I was kind of planning on, trade that off and infiltrate with the rook, right? So remember, if you can get your rook on the 7th rank, it's almost always a good decision. There's lots of targets. Even the bishop is a target, and I can very easily come behind these pawns at some point and put more pressure there. All right, so bishop f6, doubled up the rooks. Just wanted to get this rook involved. And of course, if black decides to go for this, I would have traded. I would have happily just traded everything. And I think I have enough pawns over here that I'm going to be able to win. Now, one thing that's important about this endgame is these bishops are on the same color square. So mine's on a dark square. This is on a dark square. That's important. And I like to see that. If they would have been on opposite colors, so for example, if this bishop would have been on the white square, I would have thought twice about trading all the rooks like that, because then it's much more likely that black's going to be able to create a draw, right? Opposite colored bishop endings are very drawish. I don't know that one extra pawn is enough, but in this case, I think it would have been. So I would have traded the rooks here. And like I said, if not, I would have maybe thought about doing something else, like potentially bringing my bishop around, blockading the file, keeping at least one rook on the board, something like that to give myself more winning chances. But in this case, I would have been fine with that. Now, my opponent didn't do that, played h6. And so I'm just relocating the bishop. Bishop's not really doing anything there. It's already defended. That pawn's already defended. And so this diagonal, I'm preventing the rook from coming here and potentially pressuring this. I'm also eyeing these squares that I can invade with my bishop. Okay, so just, you know, when you see a position like this and you're not sure what to do, you want to try to improve your pieces as much as you can. Now, I could have went for this and attacked this pawn, but black could have defended, and I don't know if that would have actually accomplished much. So anyway, bishop f4, bishop comes in attacking this pawn. So I played a3 to defend it, attacking this pawn. So now I played the rook up to defend that. And I'm trying to, keep the pieces that are most active where they're at. So like I didn't bring this rook back here because then I'm taking it off of a really nice square. This one, I can just very easily slide up and it leaves that one there. So that's why I chose this rook. Bishop f6, bishop c7. So I figured let's just go ahead and prevent black from doing anything with their rooks. Even if they wanted to try to trade or get control of some of these files, they can't. My bishop is just doing an awesome job. It's also blocking this. So now I can think about ideas of coming here and taking the pawn. And again, it's just an example of a very small improvement in my position, right? So that's all I was doing there. King comes up, and I decided while there's not really much that black can do, let's continue to improve my position and bring my king into the game. I saw an opportunity to push this pawn with tempo, and I said, why not? And then continued to bring the king into the game. Okay, bishop goes all the way here, which is a weird move. And as soon as I saw this move, I'm like, oh, hold on a second, that just seems really misplaced. And then as I thought about it more, I realized it is misplaced, and I can play this move c3 and trap it. And now the bishop is stuck, right? The bishop can go here, but it doesn't really have a lot of options. And even if it takes this, I can still probably trap it with my king, right? And so that's what my plan was, just bringing king over. I wanted to keep things locked up here because I have a plan. I want to follow through with my plan and win this bishop, right? So I'm just kind of maneuvering, still bringing the king over. Took that. It was just a free pawn. Didn't want to give black that. And I decided, okay, let's go ahead and trade that. And then here we go. So this was my plan, right? Bishop is stuck, and I'm going to win the bishop, okay? So my opponent did a good job of at least giving themselves something, right? These two connected pawns, along with a rook, they did a nice job, creating some counter chances. But I have a lot of pieces that are very close to the pawns, and so it's not too difficult. I decided the easiest thing to do was go ahead and start creating some threats of my own. That's going to keep the rook busy, right? Guarding this. Brought the rook back. I wanted it to be away from the pawns as much as possible, but also be able to help stop these, okay? And then b5. This was a good move because I wanted to use my bishop, right? And it's not easy for the black pawns to make progress. Opponent missed this, I think. They missed that the bishop was involved and played this move. But let's just pretend that they had played this. My plan was simple. I was just going to push this forward. And if they pushed this one, I was going to take it, put my rook here, and then even though black can come down, I can create this blockade. And black can't get through. And of course, two pawns on the 6th rank, generally speaking, will beat a rook. And so black has no way to really stop these guys from becoming a queen at this point. And so that was one option that I calculated. And then the other one, if this pawn pushes, I can just simply, I don't even have to move my rook. I can actually just push these and keep going, right? And they're both, it doesn't matter. I'm going to take them with my bishop regardless of which pawn moves. So it seemed pretty straightforward to me. That's why I pushed b5, just to involve the bishop. You do have to be careful in positions like this, because if you don't pay attention and those pawns come down and get a queen or something, you can be in trouble. But I calculated that I could sack the bishop and then I would win with these guys. So, all right. But like I said, sorry, that's not what happened. Like I said, my opponent missed this. And so it just made my life really easy. Just sat the bishop there and pushed this and got a queen. We played a few more moves, and there's the end. So, all right, there's one more game that I want to show you. So let's go ahead and jump into that one now. All right, so here's the next game, and I was black. I played the elephant gambit this time, just kind of mixing it up. And my opponent played this move, which is really weird. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Most people will take either this way or this way. Queen e2 is very interesting, but I decided to do something which I like to do this a lot when I see someone's queen come out early. And basically what I do is try to get the queen misplaced. So I captured, expecting that the queen is going to retake, which they did. And now I said, okay, I'm going to give up this pawn, and I'm just going to get a quick, get some quick development and attack the queen. So I played knight f6, gave up this pawn, bishop e7, and this is kind of a sneaky move. I mean, not really a sneaky move. It's pretty obvious. Like I have to get out of the check. But what I'm doing is planning on castling next move. And notice how there's two pieces, two high value pieces in the center of the board that my rook can slide over and attack, right? Very, very dangerous for white, okay? So, you know, this is a good way to handle when your opponent brings their queen out early. Just develop your pieces, get castled quickly, and take advantage of the fact that it's a target, right? Even though I'm down a pawn, sorry, I'm down a pawn, I don't even care because I'm going to get quick development and a lot of counterplay. So, that's what I did. I just castled, and I'm threatening that this is a very real threat. Like, for example, if white plays a random move like knight c3, now I can play rook e8, and I'm going to be able to attack at least one of these. Now, of course, you know, it's not like completely winning just yet, but it's very, very dangerous for white. So anyway, that's the plan. My opponent did play bishop e2, which I think was a good move, putting something to shelter the king. So now I decided, okay, let's go ahead and develop this way with the knight, with tempo. And notice 3 pieces developed, and I'm castled, and white only has 2 pieces out, and it's going to be my turn again after this queen moves. And so that's the compensation that I get for the extra pawn. Okay, and by the way, I should mention, some people, they play gambits, they sacrifice a pawn, and then they just trade off all the pieces and go into an endgame, right? So notice, like, if we go back here, I didn't play queen e7 and force a queen trade. This would be a terrible move, right? Because now we're just going to keep trading pieces and go into an endgame, and I'm just down a pawn. Not what you want, right? I want to be aggressive. I want to use the fact that my opponent's queen is misplaced and attack it. So that's why I played bishop e7. That's why I'm continuing to keep the pressure up and attacking. And again, on queen g3, what did I do? Find a move to harass the queen. Now, I should mention that even though this is an okay move and it's following through with my plan and it led to a good outcome of the game, I missed another tactic, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that I'm missing a lot of these tactics, but it is what it is. But yeah, there's a really good move here for black that I didn't see at all. So if you want to pause and try to think through, what should I have played here? Well, the move is knight to h5, and I didn't consider it because normally a move like knight h5 is not a good move. Normally it's you're putting your knight on the rim. It's undefended. I have to be careful that the queen doesn't attack it and I lose it. It's also lined up with the bishop. There's a lot of things about that move that told my brain, like, no, don't even consider that. And it's actually the best move. And why is it the best move? Well, it's attacking the queen, but more importantly, it's unleashing the bishop. And this bishop's already unleashed, and the knight's covering this square, and this knight's covering this square, and this is covered, and this is covered. And I think you're starting to see the queen is trapped. The queen has nowhere to go. It just wins the queen. That easy. One move trap. So totally missed that. I was thinking like the right idea, right? Like attack the queen, put the pressure on the queen. I just completely missed that this just completely traps the queen. So yeah, it's a good reminder to not just immediately count out moves that you think are bad. Actually take the time to consider them briefly. And so yeah, anyway, I didn't see that. Bishop d6, similar idea, but it's not as good because white has queen h4, and the queen is obviously not trapped. It has options, and it's going to get away now. My plan, I'll just tell you, was I wanted to do this so that I could open up this for my rook, because this is kind of a common idea. If you can pin or if you can attack the piece that the king is defending, you prevent them from castling. So if white tries to castle, I'm just taking the bishop. So it's an interesting way to keep the king in the center, right? And now, of course, white can do some other things, maybe bishop e3 or bring the knight out or whatever, but still, I feel like I had a lot of pressure on the king in this position. Anyway, that's not what happened. I played bishop b6 and my opponent played bishop f4. Now, this one I did calculate a response for. If you want to pause and think through what did I play now, and if you're ready to see the solution, knight to h5 is the move. And it's funny because right here, when I was trying to decide what to do, I was calculating, okay, bishop d6, what about bishop f4? I have knight h5. And it didn't even occur to me to play knight h5 right now and just trap the queen. So It's funny how our brains do that sometimes. Anyway, bishop d6, bishop here, knight came in, and now I'm just winning a piece. White can't defend everything, and so I just took this, created queens. I thought about playing knight g2 check. I think that would be a mistake. Does anyone have any idea why that would be a mistake? Well, if you said the knight is trapped, you are correct. Now, king here, actually, I don't think is what I would have played, because then bishop h3 looks pretty nice for me. But if the king just simply moves over here, let's just say to d2, my knight is trapped. I don't know how my knight's getting out of there, and the rook's probably going to attack it. Yes, I can defend it for one move, but then the bishop's going to come back, and it looks like I was going to lose my knight. So that's why I didn't go there. And of course, the rule is when you're ahead material, so I have 4 pieces against 3 because I won the piece, it makes sense to trade. So I just traded that. Bishop to g4, a very annoying move. I'm threatening knight to d4 check, which is going to win this piece. I'm also threatening rook e8 check, which is going to win this piece. I don't believe white can actually stop it. They did their best attempt to defend it, if I can talk. But knight to d4 forks these pieces, also forces the king back. If it tries to come up, I've got this fork. Bishop c5, rook e8, lots of nasty moves. So king went back. I took the piece. The king is trapped. There's not really much for white to do at this point. I just brought my rook over to the file. And yeah, here white resigned. So, you know, good, I think, reminder that when your opponent brings their queen out early, one of the best ways to take advantage of that is just, even if you have to sacrifice a pawn or two, which a lot of times you do, because the queen is such a powerful piece, usually there's a pawn somewhere that's hanging, right? That's okay. Like, give up a pawn or two, just get your pieces out very quickly, and it's probably going to lead to a good position for you, right? And then watch out for those queen traps with knight h5, because that's pretty cool. It makes me sad that I missed that one. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this rating climb, and we'll be back next time with the 1200 to 1400 range. And stay sharp, play smart, take care.